All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the CTD webinar. Our webinar today is Transition Tech Tools to Empower Your Students. We appreciate you joining us, and I'm going to pass it off to Sean now.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for that introduction. As mentioned, my name is Sean Smith. I'm a faculty member here at the University of Kansas in the Department of Special Education, and I'm looking forward to spending about an hour with you. I just want to note as you go along, feel free to ask questions, and the facilitator will prompt me with questions, and I'll certainly try to answer them as we go along. The feedback, of course, at the end of the webinar, they really like to have some feedback, and so that will be information at the end of the webinar as well to share. So hopefully that will help. And let's get started. So our the session to me, as many of us know, we could probably spend hours on this. But within this brief period of time, I want to focus in on several different things. First of all, kind of visit about transition and our goals with transition. Of course, considering tech and resources we should consider for that. But resources that are related with technology is something I'm going to try to focus in on, as well as the tools and tips and things of that nature that allow us to facilitate that transition process. Everything I'm sharing today is off of Google Doc, as well as I'll work through the CDD system to offer it in more of a PDF, the traditional format. But I want to reinforce everything today is also off of Google Doc, and there's a QR code that will take us there as well. And I'll leave that up there for just a second because I want to introduce myself a little bit more and also give you a chance to write that down or click on that, whatever you'd like. Besides being a faculty member at the University of Kansas, and oh, by the way, as a faculty member, my work is in the area of technology. So I could speak to you all day about online learning, personalized learning, or blended learning for students with disabilities. It's work I've been doing. Also, it's good to talk to you about virtual reality. I'll mention a little bit on augmented reality. I work with a lot of teachers, both pre-service and in-service, and folks out in the field. So the many hats I wear, and I mention that because the last hat I wear, probably the most important hat, is I'm a parent. My wife and I have 4 children. We have a freshman in college, and she's not in theater, but maybe some of you have those teenagers that are a bit of a drama queen. That's our oldest. Then we have our second oldest, Nolan, just turned 17 last month. And as you can see, he's a little guy with Down syndrome. He also likes to have fun. His sister's at Villanova, so there's the Villanova t-shirt. We also have a sophomore in high school and then a 7th grader. And so I'll use Nolan as I go along today for several different reasons. One, as you can see, I've mentioned his age. And being 17, we're definitely going through this transition process. But I'd argue we've been going through this transition process since at least 3 years of age, and I'll reinforce as I go along. But we've been thinking about 21 or post-secondary or what's going to happen after he finishes high school, the process as he transitions to high school and through high school into what's next, and that's still an open question for us. We've been talking about this since 3 years old, since that first IEP meeting, and I'll integrate that as we go along. But let's get started here and start thinking about technologies. And by the way, this was at a Mexican fiesta dinner, and as you can see, anyways, Nolan enjoys his food. So, all right. But when we think about technology, one of the things I want to kind of start thinking about today is that not only do we think about technology and transition, I think we also need to think about increasingly what's happening in respect to what we need to be instructing and supporting for transition. So I'm going to go with something a little bit more adaptive in terms of transition. We can talk a lot of different things, but I'll go a little bit more adaptive when it comes to money, right? And we think of budgets, we think of different things that an individual needs to have to be able to be independent, be it going on to college, be it going into the work setting, be it going to the community setting, whatever it may be. And if you think about money there, and I've crossed out the dimes and nickels, dimes and quarters, quarters and dollars, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But when I think about money, now I go back a few years, and I still remember those Friday afternoons heading to the bank with my dad. Now I'm one of 7. And it was a chance to actually spend time with my dad. But there's also candy there that they handed out at the bank. But the reason we were at the bank on Friday night was because Saturday reduced hours, and Saturday afternoon it was closed. Sunday it was closed. There was no ATM, so we couldn't get the money out. There's 7 of us, and credit cards weren't really used that much, so he needed cash as much as possible. Now you go along with that, and the idea of going to a bank on Fridays, forget about we have ATMs. Well, now, my daughter, the freshman in college, she doesn't use cash. She uses a debit card, which is somewhat advantageous for me. I can see what she's using it for and what not using it for. But there's also automatic payments. And now we've gotten to a point where there's e-pay. And many of us will probably use the Apple Pay or the Google Wallet. I use the Apple. But there's things like tabbed out where you can go to a restaurant, get a tab, and it'll automatically tab itself out. I was at a restaurant not too long ago. The actual device was there, a little mini iPad on the table, and everything was there that I did. No money was exchanged. I didn't need to understand any money. The tip was automatically added there. So it's all this automaticity part to it. To me, the reason I'm bringing it up is yes, these apps are growing, but for individuals with disabilities, and let's take someone like Nolan, an individual with intellectual disability, for example. We've been working with Nolan for money for years. Math is a challenge for Nolan. Dollars and quarters and dimes and all that type of element, that takes time to teach. Now, definitely for individuals with intellectual disabilities, for students with more significant disabilities. But yet with the technology out there, do we really need to teach that skill? And I'd argue actually for Nolan, no, we don't. Why? Well, because we need to teach him not only how to use the tools to allow him to go up to Target and simply put his phone there, but then we also need to introduce him to tools like Pocket Guard. And Pocket Guard is one of several folks out there. It's not the best thing since sliced bread, but Pocket Guard is a good example of the fact that, okay, so Nolan needs to learn how to use the technology like Google Wallet or the Apple Pay, and then he needs to know whether or not he has enough money in his account to be able to make that purchase. Now, he may not understand numbers that well. He may not understand budgeting that well, but there's tools like this here that can then be integrated in and used for these individuals to allow them to have more of that independence. So dollars going to the ATM, if he doesn't understand that, doesn't need that skill, instead he has that electronic, and increasingly Target, the grocery store, and other things allow for that. Now, as we get started here, I want us to think about these types of technologies because the technologies are continuing to change and continue to alter. And to me, they're altering not only what is available to the individual with a disability, their independence, their empowerment, and things of that nature. Well, okay, let me just go with the illustration. The illustration that many of you saw, the idea there is that she's in an automatic car. Well, I mean, I think that right now the cap coming up next year, the U.S. government said each manufacturer, I think, is capped at 80,000 vehicles that are automatic, had some sort of automatic driving component, which makes me think, oh my gosh, the hundreds of thousands of cars we make every year, which is definitely the fact. Where I'm going with this, though, is that automaticity of driving, it's a fact. It's happening. And here's a video of individuals that are having some fun when they're playing, when they're driving. Actually, I'll reduce the audio and just have it playing while I'm talking here for a few more minutes. But clearly, there's some things we can do. We can have some fun while we're driving in the vehicle. But for individuals with disabilities, and let's say individuals that can't pass that driving test that have been limited to their ability to drive in the past, the technology is getting to a point where hopefully we're not going to sleep as we drive, but the technology is getting to a point where it is really directing and allowing for a great deal of independence. So what does that mean as we move on for individuals with disabilities when it comes to driving? Very possibly with that aspect of it being automatic, we may have to rethink the way an individual gets a license, who gets a license. But if it actually offers a lot of independence in terms of the driver and limits what they need to do from a cognitive perspective, does that mean the Nolans of the world, individuals with intellectual disabilities, now have access to a skill that they didn't have in the past? If so, to me, it alters what we do in terms of instruction for that transition. It also offers differences in terms of what we do for the transition support when they get out into the community. Yes, a bit far-fetched, but where I'm trying to go with is I believe the technology is really altering not only how we plan for transition, but what we need to instruct as the individual gets ready for transition and what it means when they actually get out there in their own independence. So, for example, some of you may be familiar with the Transit app. The Transit app is an app that you can use, we can use here in Kansas City. It's across the country in terms of a number of different cities. Now, the way I'm going to project here today is it's going to be more still. I'll get to some websites here in just a second, folks. So let me just mention this app real quickly. It's called Transit. It's an app called Transit. And basically, Transit app allows you to do a number of different things. First of all, it will work with, I don't have to have, let's say I'm in here in the Kansas City area, I don't have to use the Kansas City app, which may be very poor, to utilize their bus system. Instead, I can then say, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm trying to get at in the Kansas City area. It'll automatically give me the bus components. It'll give me where I am in terms of getting to the bus stop. It'll tell me when I'm there what bus to get on. It'll tell me when to get off. So it'll give me prompts. It'll tell me in the next two stops, get off. It'll give me an audio prompt. It'll give me a visual prompt. It'll tell me how long it will take for the bus route to go if I want that. It'll tell me when I need to leave to pick up that bus based on walking directions from my house to the bus stop or when the bus is supposed to be there. It'll also give me audio prompts along the way. It'll give me reminders that the bus is coming. It'll give me schedules and a number of other things. Now, the universal in terms of the understanding of the app, it's a little bit, it could be a little bit more universal, but it offers a number of different options to be able to describe everything from maps to the prompts to a number of different things as I go along. And what I like about this app is it works across bus systems. So Washington DC bus app maybe, or the Metro app may be very complicated to use. I can supersede that by using this app instead. I believe that's going to be continuing to alter things. And those types of apps to me will alter then the amount of information we need to instruct with the individual, the skills we need to develop in the individual, and also to me enhance their independence and their empowerment. Now with that said, let me kind of step back for just a moment.
Sean?
Yes.
I'm sorry, we had a question. How
Sure.
is this app different than Google Maps or similar mapping apps?
So what I like about the Transit app that's a little different from the Google Maps is that, first of all, now maybe I'm unfamiliar with the Google Maps. I use that fairly widely, but in terms of being able to get right into the transportation app of the bus schedule, I can use the Google Apps in that manner. It's similar that way. What I'm finding here is it's a little bit better with the maps of the transit system versus what Google Maps is offering me. The interface is the interface seems to be a little bit more user friendly, and the prompts in terms of the audio prompts in terms of when I need to leave the house, the reminders. Again, maybe Google Maps offers those features. I'm not seeing those features as easy to use as the Transit app offers. Now, this may not be the be and end all. Where I'm going with is the apps are increasingly offering these features. So if Google Map offers it, great. But it's those types of things that offer everything from prompts to the maps to the directions to when to get off, when to get on, how often to, when to get started to get to the bus, those types of things. Those are nice features that traditionally, where I'm going with this example overall, is that traditionally those are some of the things we'd spend a lot of time on from a transition development to develop that skill, where now that app is actually replacing some of those skills we need to develop, allowing us potentially a little bit more time on other elements that that individual needs to have for that level of independence. So I'm kind of beating that one down a little bit. So I hope that answered the question. To me, it's trying to illustrate how it's offering a little bit more flexibility and independence as we go along with development. So now I want to take a step back here for just a moment before I get into the full-blown of apps and technology tools. I want to get us thinking about transition just a bit. And because of the video, I'll limit myself with the video here, but this is for those of us that have not seen Graduating Peter. It's a video of Graduating Peter that basically, to me, offers some of the challenges with that planning for the transition process, meaning information, everything about SSI to Medicaid for individuals with more significant disabilities, to college options, to what exactly does involve itself on the ITP, individual transition plan, when should we be doing it, and things of that nature. Now, I want to go sideways there for a moment because I think that when we think about the tools for transition, we think about the technologies for transition, I think we need to be aware of the issues regarding preparing for transition. And in so doing, there's some nice resources out there, electronic resources, that allow us to kind of be planning for that transition process. So I want to visit a few of those with you. And the first one I want to visit with you is Understood. And so first of all, folks, all the resources, as I mentioned, almost all, I'll be adding a few more, are off this Google Doc, but let's get over to the Understood site. If you haven't used Understood, Understood is a free website. It was created for parents, particularly. It's for individuals with learning and attention issues, and they've done a wonderful job of offering information when it comes to a number of different areas. And this one happens to be with the transition planning process. And with it, of course, they go through the basics. They go through how it ties into when the transition plan should take place. It gives examples of not only with the IEP, but it gives examples of the individual transition plan, which, for example, here, I'll show you that real quick. So here's an example that downloads off of Understood that offers just a basic understanding of what could be filled out for an individual transition plan. Now, I emphasize this, especially this area here, where these three columns, supporting IEP goals, the transition activity, and finally the person or agency involved. These to me will lead me to the types of technology tools I might be needed for because of the tasks I'm being asked for, the environment I'm being asked to do that, what the student needs or what their strengths are, what their challenges are, and being able to break that down from the individual transition plan then ties over to that technology solution. So Understood's a great resource for that, kind of walks you through elements. Again, it's free and it offers a variety of different resources for those purposes. So that's just one consideration. Now, with that in mind, I want to share with you a few other things. Now, of course, there's the Understood resource, but there's also this idea that when we're planning for transition, we're thinking of the tools to help us with transition, we need to think of a number of different things, and I bring up with the IEP, but I also bring up the fact that within that 4-year experience, at least 4 years between 9th and 12th grade, we should be thinking of that triennial, that reevaluation. And to me, that's a perfect opportunity when we're thinking of the reevaluation. It's a perfect opportunity to think of data when it relates to what is necessary for an individual to transition. And I argue that we do this very poorly. I can explain. I'll give you the example myself with Nolan right now. So Nolan is up for his 3-year evaluation. It was recommended that he didn't need his 3-year evaluation. As I examined that, it seemed that seemed to be typical. He's 17, he's a junior. Why do we need it? We don't need it to identify. He has intellectual disabilities. We don't need it for his services. His services are going to continue. And so what would be lost out of that is a transition inventory or a transition assessment. And there's some good ones out there. The one that we're using right now is the Transition Planning Inventory 2. It's out of ProEd. I won't go into detail here in terms of opening it up and all that because of time. But if you're not looking at resources like this, to me, we're missing the boat on not only identifying the individual's strengths, but their needs when it comes to everything from, yes, community living and employment, but social emotional skills, some of the behavioral interactions that are more relevant to, and they ask in questions that are more relevant to what would be required in that transition process. And so it could be for preparation for 18 to 21 services if the child's eligible for that. It could be when they're considering college programs and some of the assistance and the planning they'll need to be able to be eligible for those college programs. It could be for some of the community work aspects. And I think that's data that's often left off the table as I listen to colleagues across the country as well as here regionally. It seems that we underappreciate that ability to really collect information about the transition process. So again, the TPI, the Transition Planning Inventory is one I like, but there's others out there as well. Now there's other resources to consider to learn a little bit more about the transition process. And some of you are like, Sean, I know the transition process, get to the technology. I will. For others of you, you may be saying, well, wait a minute here, we're thinking about the technology tools, like I need schedulers and I need budget things and things of that nature. But to me also, this Transition Coalition is one of these resources. There's a number of resources to further educate us about the transition process. So I just want to go over here real quick to the Transition Coalition. If you're unfamiliar with it, this is another free resource. This happens to be here at the University of Kansas, but it's known nationally for its work. And they offer a variety of different resources. So for example, here it's if you're a transition coordinator, you're trying to get information about resources to develop and improve the transition program, there you go. Here's some on the assessment guide. So let's go click here real quick. And you can see in terms of assessment guides and guidance you might need, the various types of assessments. Let's go to assessments here. Various types of assessments that you might be able to use. There's the TPI, but there's the environmental job assessment measure, a variety of different assessment measures that potentially could be used. Equally important are the trainings. So for example, Transition Coalition has some wonderful modules. And so you can sign up for free. Here I am over here, the login. I'll log in. Again, I've signed in for free. And it will pop me into a number of different topics. So for example, here's a module on simply best practices when it comes to transition. Here's another one on enhancing employment outcomes. Here's one on the essentials of self-determination, all the way down to transitions for youth with EB and BD. So here we go. Let's go to the one with best practices. Each one of these offers a it is text heavy, but remember, this is for us, the professionals, the parents, the folks supporting the individuals looking to transition. But to me, it gets over, in this one, it deals with a general overview, everything from transition to IDA, to the IP process, to the planning process. But by understanding these elements and firmly understanding these elements, I think then we can take elements that, well, for example, an earlier CTD presentation on assessment and AT Well, that's all about planning and making connections. Well, again, here, the same thing. Understanding what we're trying to do from the transition process and making the connections over the technology, a nice win-win. But again, the Transition Coalition offers a number of tools, assessment reviews, transition tips. It offers products and materials to consider. They do a number of different presentations to offer. And of course, what I really like are the modules and what the modules offer in terms of your training and independence there. So that's the Transition Coalition. Now, instead of going back to the PowerPoint, I'll offer another couple resources to consider. So besides the Transition Coalition, another good resource is the Autism Internet modules. Now, you may be unfamiliar with those. You're thinking, wait, this is Transition, Sean, you're talking about autism. Well, out of Ohio, the Ohio Center on Autism and Low Incidence Disabilities, OCALI, which actually right now in Columbus, I think there's about 2,000 people at their annual conference. Columbus in November, getting almost 2,000 people. I'm always amazed at that. But anyways, they've created, I think, about 100 plus, if not 200 plus modules on a variety of topics in relationship to autism. Now, when you scroll down here, though, you'll see they have a whole series on autism in the workplace. Well, it's not simply autism in the workplace. They have a number of different things here that to me are very relevant to kids with disabilities in the workplace. And so everything from, yes, FBAs and the like, but a number of different topics here that would be like, for example, the employee with autism, transition between activities, video modeling, which I'm going to mention here a little bit in terms of technology. But all these types of modules, so here, let's go into the the employee with autism. Each one begins with an introduction, and then they have a series of elements to take a look at. Now, you'll see pre-assessment objectives. You can actually do this for CEU credit if you'd like, but equally important to me, I'm going down here and saying, well, wait, what's the job coach challenges? So I click down here and I walk through in terms of elements of job coaching to be able to understand, okay, so here is what the job coach potentially could do, and maybe here in terms of what the job coach is offering, oh gosh, prompting, oh gosh, reinforcing routines. Those are things I could look for technology tools to make the connection, and we'll get to those here in just a moment. But it's giving me that overview of some of the issues related to transition that I may not be appreciating that gets me connected back over to the technology. So that's just a consideration. Those are considerations for us. Again, those are considerations for us, but they're technology-based in terms of the web-based for us to review. Here's one, the Transition Coalition. They contextualize things around a case. Here's another resource. This is the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. I mentioned this one just because they have a really nice site here for evidence-based practices when it comes to transition. And take a look at that when you have an opportunity. They really walk you through what we know works in the area of transition. And again, for those of us that use technology, we always try to align technology tools to what works. Well, this is another great site to find out what's working in transition to then connect the technology to do that. So that's the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. And then here's another view of the AIM module. And I bring this one up because Randy Lewis, many of you may be familiar with Walgreens, has done, they've gotten international exposure for their work in the area of employment, particularly for individuals with autism, but a number of companies have traveled throughout the country to go to the Walgreens plant there in Illinois to learn a little bit more about what they're doing to transition for individuals with disabilities. And so here's Randy talking about it. So the AIM module offers a lot of different perspectives and a lot of power there. Now, here's another video, but I wanted to get back into our technology. So, excuse me, our kind of tools. It does have some audio, and so I'll ask our facilitator, was that a major concern before I try to play another video, or was it just a handful of people that said, hey, I can't hear the audio? Hello? Well, I'm going to give it a try here. This is a young lady talking about QR codes, and this is a technology that I want to kind of show in a variety of different ways that we can use for transition purposes. So let's see if folks can hear her. Here, well, I'll just ignore the audio then. I don't know what happened. Sorry about that. Folks, for those of us that aren't using QR codes in this last video I wanted to illustrate, so I'll try to illustrate it with my voice instead. She basically is talking about, and here I'll fast forward it just a bit in terms of we can show what she actually grabs, and that will help me at least. And that is, she grabs a QR code, and there you go. And she uses these QR codes to navigate around the classroom. Well, QR codes are increasingly becoming helpful in the transition process. The University of Tennessee has actually done some research in this area that I'll mention here in just a moment. But Pokemon to go, for those of us that are Pokemon folks, we're basically working with a QR code type of technology. And as we have markers throughout our environment, and when we select our device next to that marker, then our Pokemon shows up, right? Well, the same can be said for our environment for individuals that are trying to transition. So for example, we're working with a number of individuals right now with movement through office space and hallways. And through the movement through office space and hallways, and we started this at the high school level with movement through the hallway with locker connections and things of that nature, the individuals use their devices, be it an iPad, mostly it's an iPad, but it could be a cellular phone, anything with a camera, and they're coming up with markers that, yes, they could be QR codes, but they could also be, instead of QR codes, they could simply be markers along the lines that when they actually come to it, it actually then gives a video, it gives an audio example, it gives an image to illustrate what they're trying to instruct. So for example, what we're seeing it used for is I want to move through a hallway and I need to move my direction wise. Well, my direction wise could be as I move through, I see certain places where they're markers, so to speak. I put my device over it and it will remind me, yes, continue in this direction. Give me this audio prompt. Give me this video. So QR codes, by the way, are free. They're easy to use. I have several different resources to share in terms of how to create them. And actually, you know what? I'm going to stop here for just a second and actually show you real quick how easy it is to create a QR code for those of us that are unfamiliar with it. So QR code generator, those are several sites, and I have several off our Google Doc. But FYI, I can take, well here, let's take a look at our large Google Doc. So there's our 70 character up there website. And I'll go over to my QR code, and you'll notice it's gray right now. I'll simply go ahead and paste it in there and create a QR code, and there you go. So I have my own QR code. I can copy and paste, I can download it, I can put it into a Word document, I can print it off, it's an image, I can send it to an individual, and the like. And the idea here, and let me get back to our slideshow, the idea here is that, well, some of the research out of the University of Tennessee has been, for example, they used a QR code type of augmented reality where they compared an app called Layer with traditional Google Maps with paper maps. And they basically looked to see if an individual could move through their environment where they're trying to get from place to place to place. And also not only from place to place to place, but they're trying to determine whether or not there are jobs available in these places. And what they found were individuals were much more successful in movement through, and this was going across blocks. They were able to follow the maps, follow the locations to where they're supposed to go, and identify places that actually had opportunities for employment using what would be using kind of the QR code or marker, but augmentative reality, because as they put their device over, like in this one, it was over an employment opportunity, they were prompted with, it opened up on their screen, and this is what I wanted to share you the video, but we can't, but it opened up on their screen with the actual illustration. And this illustration here is the fact that here's the employment opportunity, but it also integrated with a map. So they were able to move through with a map and also use the augmented reality that was connected with a QR code to make that connection. So this is a technology that's continuing to grow. A real easy app to use is Aurasma. It's free, A-U-R-A-S-M-A. I have a video here, but I won't play it. But Aurasma is a great app for, it's free. You can create any augmented reality. And the skinny of it, folks, is you grab any image, any part of your environment you want to take a picture of. These two are showing you a yearbook that was actually created. And from the yearbook, you can take the Aurasma app over the yearbook page, and it would actually pop up a video, in this instance, of that individual in the yearbook playing tennis. So as they turn the pages, you could use the Aurasma app over other pages, and it would show the students playing football, the students singing, etc. That's just one thing. It could have been video, but it could have been audio, it could have been images, whatever. But those are now increasingly becoming available in the environment. Let me go back for just a second. University of Tennessee also did this using an app called Red Laser. And what they did was they basically wanted to make sure that in terms of allergens on what the individual is going to eat. And so, for example, if they have a gluten allergy, they quickly learn to go across and scan the codes there, as you can see in that image. They scan the code to determine, gosh, does it have gluten? Yes, it does. Oh, I need to worry about that. Therefore, I can't eat that. So instead of trying to understand and get into the reading of all those elements, they learned it very basically through a QR code and being able to take a look at that marker of the device. So enough on that, but some things to be thinking about in terms of interacting with our environment, with the technology, to better understand not only everything from navigation to the recipes to directions to images that are there for directions in terms of work. All right. Well, let's kind of focus over on apps. Many of you are thinking, okay, Sean, I'm here to learn about apps and different technologies. Well, there are, and as many of you have probably participated in, a number of CTD presentations where they've walked you through this app and this app and this app and this app. And I wanted to cover some material in the first half hour. I've covered material more about, let's make sure we understand the transition process. Here's some resources on the transition. Let's think about the individual transition process in terms of an inventory and assessment. But I also want to talk to you about apps, but instead of sharing you, well, this app and this app and this app, where that app may be relevant to you, this app may not be relevant to you, I want to reinforce how we find that right app. And let me kind of back up for just a second. And that is, so with the transition information that I'm going to collect, with the information I'm going to get from the inventory, with the information I'm going to get from the assessment, I'm going to now say that, okay, I have these needs. I have to find a tool to address these needs. It may be prompting. It may be the fact that scheduling, things of that nature. So how do I find that right app? And here's an example of, I'm trying to find an app more for writing purposes, for word prediction, text-to-speech, knowing the most common spelling mistakes. I offer this example because oftentimes in our K through 12 AT assessment process, we should be able to narrow things down to this. But now how do I find that app? And for those of you that are saying, well, gosh, Sean, I'm just going to Google it. Well, the problem is we're going to find a lot of things. We're going to find millions of things when we Google. Well, don't worry, Sean, I'll go to the App Store. Yeah, but the App Store is going to come up with tens of thousands of apps. Well, just ask my neighbor. Yeah, but gosh darn it, I don't know how many apps I've deleted where my neighbor gave me a great recommendation, and I realized their recommendation is not really relevant to what I was looking for. And so instead, I'm going to offer some suggestions. And so I'm going to take us back over to our Google Doc and have some considerations here. So let me get over here to our Google Doc that I shared earlier. And I'm going to scroll down here to a number of different resources that I have listed here, but I'm going to start off with the apps. And under the apps, what I want to share with you here is some things to consider in terms of finding that right app. And let's go to bridging apps, for example. We'll just scroll down here to bridging apps. And bridging apps, which I actually have open, but bridging apps is right here, bridgingapps.org. Okay. So I'm just going to go to bridging apps. And bridging apps, if you haven't utilized it, what they've done is they basically, it's an Easter Seals project, but they basically have taken the tens of thousands of apps, and including several different things, but with the apps, they've taken tens of thousands of apps and said, okay, we found about 3,300 apps that we think are relevant to basically technology and people with disabilities. And that's what, okay, great. So now I'm going to go up under my app search, and I'm going to find an app. And the tool that they've created here offers me, now here they have 3,200 apps. And you're like, only 3,200, Sean? Well, I think you'll find, and I'll recommend this here and reinforce this here in just a second, but you'll use this, possibly some additional tools, and I think you'll find certain apps that just pop up. But again, the reason I'm sharing this with you and reinforcing this is that, so I'm going to use the transition process, be it the ITP, I'm going to use the transition data I collect, I'm going to isolate down what I need to find, and now I'm going to use these tools to potentially find them. So with that, so for example, let's say I'm looking for something on money. All right, so real basic, right? So we'll look at search for money. And with that, a number of different apps will pop up, right? So a number of different apps pop up. They've rated the apps, so they've rated the apps in their own system, and you can go to the Bridging Apps website to find out how they've rated the apps and that information, which is great. But equally important to me would be the fact that I can actually do searching over here, and I'm over here on the left-hand side. I can search in a variety of different ways. So for example, I can I could look from a search from a review status. Okay, I want it the official valued, and again, that's Bridging Apps. You take a look at that. I can look at it from a category perspective. So I want to look at it from, well, I'm really not looking so much for money. I'm looking for something else that's, let's say, exercise related to health and wellness. And so with that, they'll click over and make a connection between money and health and wellness, which that one may not connect as well. But again, I can select that as a category. As you notice, as I select it, it'll change the apps it finds. Let's go ahead and minimize that here. I can go up under age and say, well, the individual I'm working with is, well, you may say Nolan's 17. Well, he's 17, but I might want to put in here more his functional in terms of where he's operating when it comes to money. I might want to put in the years there, or the best, which is definitely not 17. It's probably more about 9 or 10. So I might find some apps that are more appropriate for that functional level. Now, I'd have to review to say that maybe a little bit too immature for him, but then, again, that's a consideration. Or I could put in his age. Of course, it allows me to do price here. It allows me to do skill. And skill, it allows across a variety of different topics. Again, this is something you spend a little time with to understand the different tools they're offering. They even align to Common Core. They align to grade level. Of course, you can differentiate across mobile device. And again, it's only looking for apps that they've identified relevant for students with special needs, and it's only doing it from about 3,300 apps. So that's something to consider. So that's called bridging apps. But another tool out here in terms of finding things, Common Sense Media, some of us may be familiar with that. Common Sense Media offers a variety of different things, but including app reviews. And so here I could go ages. So let's say I'm looking for something for Nolan for 17. So I can select under 17, but I can also under apps select again device. But I can also go here device, remember Chromebook as well, not only in terms of iPad or mobile device. I could do pricing structure. I could select, of course, under education. I could select under the content area or the skill level, topics, and of course, more ways to browse. So Common Sense Media allows me a variety of different ways to find that app. And now here I might find, let's say I find a half dozen apps here, and I find it under, let's say I search under money. So I'm looking up under here in terms of what I'm searching for. Well, to me, I would compare that compared to the bridging apps, and maybe I'll find one or two that they're both finding, oh, that might be the app to consider. So that's another place to consider for looking. The other resource that I really like and I use regularly is the Autism apps, and that is, it's actually an app to find apps. And maybe, imagine some of you use it. What I like about it is it's organized under a lot of different areas that are relevant to individual disabilities and for transition. So for example, they'll look at areas of finding an app when it deals with social competence. Well, what? The Pew study 2 years ago came out with the top 5 issues when it comes to successful employment. One of the, I think number 2 is social competence for all individuals, let alone individuals with disabilities. So this is an app that actually will organize under autism topic areas or categories, but it'll allow us to find apps using an app, which I think is fairly nifty. That's the Autism app. But of course, there's other resources along the way. There's Pinterest. Of course, Pinterest is excellent for a number of different topic areas. So if we were doing early childhood special education, I'd say begin and stop at Pinterest. But they do have some resources there when it comes to transition. Kindertown offers resources when it comes to education. And again, some of these may be very relevant to things I'm trying to work on for my age. Here's here's device, here's price up here. Okay, but I can also do content area. And content area is I develop skills for that transition. This is a little bit more K through 12 orientated, but again, another nice app to be able to find apps, and that's Kindertown. Let me give you a couple more and then we'll kind of move on. Of course, there's, as I mentioned, Pinterest. There's a number of different review places. Apple has a nice place in terms of finding apps. App Crawler does that as well. And actually, the last one I'll go to is, let's get out of this one here. And let's see, I think I wanted to go to, I had it open here just a moment ago, and I think I'll just simply go to it off our Google Doc. And that is a site that, to me, reviews things in a nice way. There's a lot of different places to do this here, but this is Apps for Special Needs. And Apps for Special Needs, actually what it offers is video. And again, I thought I had this open. Oh, there we go. I think there we are. Yep, so Apps for Special Needs. Now, some of these are older. So for example, this was reviewed about 5-6 years ago. But what I like about this tool is it offers the actual Apps for Special Needs, offers a host of apps. And yes, you'll have to go through to find out those are more relevant to your needs. But again, based on the data you have, you'll look for those areas for transition purposes. And this gentleman actually will review the apps with a video, which to me gives you a nice flavor of looking at that app before I make a decision to download and use it. And by the way, if I'm not using something like this, I don't download an app, regardless of what I found it for, until I go to YouTube or I've seen a video of it. And even if YouTube is offering it from a marketing perspective, at least it's introducing the app so I can visualize it and get an understanding of it, especially if it's relevant to the needs of the transition needs. So, okay, so those are just some resources to consider as you go along for finding that right app. And again, I'm not going to start looking for the right app until I have data and understanding of what I'm looking for in respect to the individual I'm working for transition. So with that in mind, let me kind of consider a few other things as we move on and coming closer to the end. There are other resources to consider that I think are extremely relevant. So, for example, resources that have been created for the population when it comes to transition issues. So, for example, this is out of Cognitopia. This is a group that was created, and here, let me go to their actual website here. What they've done is they've created a number of different tools that are specifically focused on self-management for individuals with more cognitive disabilities or developmental delays. And so that image I had a moment ago is their picture planner. And their picture planner works on an iPad, picture planner works on a phone, picture planner works on a computer as well. Now, Cognitopia, what they're focusing on is individuals primarily with disabilities, and particularly individuals that are trying to deal with developmental skills more for transition. So they don't have a huge amount of resources, but what they do have are a number of different tools that are very much related to this type of issue, individual disabilities, individuals that are looking for support in terms of their development. Another resource is AbleLink Technologies. Now, AbleLink Technologies is focused also on individuals that are in need of cognitive support, individuals with intellectual disabilities, individuals with learning disabilities, individuals also with autism. And they've created a number of different supports, both web and mobile device perspective, and they've done it for a number of different purposes. A lot of theirs are for in the area of skill development or for independence. So for example, here they'll offer things for, well here, they'll offer things for everything from a web browser to an email to everyday skill development to living safely. All these in everyday skills and living safely, those are apps to walk you through self-directed learning on what I think 40 plus in skills necessary for living independently. And they've created a video library for that then you interact with, and you can personalize as well, but it's really related to the learning needs of an individual with more of a cognitive disability. Another company, I'm going to the website, is Good Karma. Now, Good Karma offers tools like, and many of you, and this is a couple tools I want to emphasize, tools like the visual schedule. The visual schedule is a phenomenal, it's a scheduler my son uses that basically allows for, as you can see, images. It allows for me to have tasks associated with an image. It allows me to say whether or not I'm done with that task. It gives me that audio prompt. It gives me an ability to record what I'm actually asked to do. It allows me in this instance also to print off the schedule. And it interacts with a number of different devices, so I can share my schedule, back up my schedule. But the most important thing to me with a visual schedule is it's at the cognitive level of a variety of individuals with disabilities. And that's one of the things that Good Karma offers in terms of their resources. They also offer the resource in terms of visual schedule planner. And again, I can preset this, or how it's created, it allows an individual potentially with a little bit more of a disability in terms of significant disability utilize this as well. Everything from the self-help and care to taking adaptive skills at home, to transportation, to interaction in terms of community, to what I do for work. But the nice thing about this is both these resources are excellent for what I could do in the school to be able to prepare and utilize in my given day, and then of course transition and use in the community settings as I go on. Those three resources particularly that I share, to me, the reason I share them is they're very relevant to individuals with the needs we're talking about, with individuals with more cognitive needs, individuals that are going to be more assistance when it comes to transition. All right, so with that said, let me go back over to our presentation here. And actually, I want to move over to, I wanted to share, I do want to share one more thing here. And actually, in this instance, I'm going to open up a different PowerPoint here. Because I want to share with you another example. Now this is kind of as we're wrapping things up. I know you can't hear this, but I want you to be aware of it, or some of you can't hear. I'll take the audio off for those that can hear it. But this kind of, there's so many different things to talk about, but one of the things I want to reinforce is the power of something like a technology to use across the school to get into the community. Now, this is my son Nolan, using what's called, well, he's got a component, a video series called Strolling with Nolan. Now, Strolling with Nolan, I'm sharing this because to me, the power of video, and the power of video to be able to assist the individual when it comes to transition components. Now, what are you talking about here, Sean? Well, first of all, let me kind of, well, here, I'll play it as I'm talking. What Nolan has done is Nolan has used video since an early age. Now, what you're seeing right now is no one's using video to actually go about and interview folks across Lawrence High School where he goes to school. Now, with the video, he's done this for organization purposes. He's done this for structuring an outline. He's done this for speech and language communication. But this is for a journalism class. But the reality is he uses video to share what he knows in a variety of different settings. So instead of having to write that essay, he's creating video off of everything from Camtasia to Screencastify, which are apps, to Photo Booth, to images he's creating and then putting them into the video. He's using iMovie. But in the process of developing that skill and using these videos to illustrate what he knows, he's also then being able to utilize it for video modeling. And many of us know video modeling is a very effective tool. Well, the video modeling now is being used with the augmentative reality I mentioned a moment ago. So as he's going around his setting, he's using augmentative reality to be reminded when he goes into a kitchen, if he wants to do the following adaptive skill task, the augmentative reality, when he captures that stove, it will walk him through steps through a video, what he needs to do to make a certain a recipe or whatever it may be. Or he comes to the laundry room and it gives him the steps to basically put his clothes in and do his laundry through video. The augmentative reality connects to the device that then gives him the video. So he's already comfortable with video. He's made his own video and then uses video modeling as he goes along for that type of connection. So now let me go back out of here and bring it back over to the slideshow we were using here a moment ago. And I want to kind of bring back to the resources. I know I've touched upon some things. I hope I've got you thinking. I know I haven't covered every single tool, and I've just given you kind of a brief introduction to it. I have a number of resources there off the Google Doc that I have not shared, but they're there for your review. I want to emphasize as I kind of walk away here a few different things, and the big thing is that connecting to the idea of what we know from the transition process and the ITP and the assessment to the tools we need to find to then integrate them into the classroom. I want to make sure I give a few minutes for questions, and so I'll stop there to see what questions we might have. So I'm hearing silence on my end. Just want to make sure if there's any questions and or the facilitator is offering anything off the chat.
Looks like some people are typing. Let's wait and see what comes out.
Sure.
Wendy said, what about using coaches for helping to facilitate the transition?
So the use of coaches, sure, coaches are excellent. I'm not sure if you could clarify in terms of the question there, in terms of a technology for coaching, or?
We'll wait for Wendy to type
Sure,
back.
thanks, Wendy.
Judy's asking, what have you found to be useful for alarms for waking up and getting morning routine moving?
So, it all depends upon the individual, and back to the data. I mean, as many of us know, there's an alarm feature right there on our phone, and whether or not mom or dad or the individual that's living with the child or the adult, if there is an individual, to be able to preset that. Now, there's ways of presetting our phone so certain days we could have the alarm set. So to me, there's a number of different apps that do for time. I don't have a favorite one for alarms. So to me, I think it's more the skill the individual needs. So for example, if they need a sound versus also a light, also some sort that lights up the room, there are some apps for that. I have some, I could add some of those resources up in the Google Doc, but those are the types of things I think you find when you're searching under some of those tools I shared, depending upon, again, the need. I think there's a number of different apps to do that. So, did Wendy clarify her question with coaching?
Not yet.
Okay. If no other questions, I hope I made a few connections, and I do appreciate it and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Sean. That was a great webinar. Thank you. That was a great webinar.
I can give control back over to you so I can stop sharing my screen. There you go.